The sky over Anchor Down went black at the start of second shift, and 40 meters down a coolant shaft with a flashlight clamped in her teeth. Mira Caldas was the last person on the colony to learn that the war had finally bothered to come for them. She felt it before she heard anything. The shaft was old company tubing, the kind that hummed with the reactor's pulse, the way a chest hums when you press your ear to it, and that hum was the most reliable thing in Mira's life. She had spent 11 years learning its moods. So when the pulse stuttered, a single skipped beat, like the colony had caught its breath, she froze with the spanner half-turned and listened with her whole body. Then the lights in the shaft browned out and came back the wrong color. And Foreman Adeyemi's voice came down the comm channel, sounding like a man reading his own obituary. "Caldas, wherever you are, get up here. I'm in your coolant line, Bem. You want me to leave it leaking?" Mira, he never used her first name. "Leave it leaking?" She went up the ladder with the spanner, still in her fist because 30 years of habit doesn't ask permission. And when her head cleared the deck plate of the maintenance level, she understood the way you understand a thing in a dream. All at once and from the wrong direction. Through the long armor glass strip that ran the length of the gallery, the sky above the ore fields was no longer the bruised violet of a Telos evening. It was moving. It was a low ceiling of something that churned and folded over on itself, a tide that had got into the air and didn't know which way was down. And where the floodlights caught the underside of it, she could see that it was made of pieces. Thousands upon thousands of small black pieces, each the size of a man's torso, each one beating a pair of segmented wings that were not wings, descending on the colony like the first hour of a snowstorm that meant to bury them all. "Beale," Adeyemi said, beside her now, and she had not heard him cross the gallery. His big, careful hands were flat on the glass. "Relay station picked them up 40 minutes ago coming out of the dark side." 40 minutes, Mira. They were on top of us before anyone finished the coffee. "We're a rock," she said. Own voice surprised her with how level it was. "We process ore and we ship it and we drink and we die of old age. There's nothing here. There's a reactor here," Adeyemi said. "They like reactors." She had heard the stories the same as everyone. In the long way you hear stories about a thing that happens to other colonies. The Veal did not negotiate because there was no one inside the Veal to negotiate with. They were a single intelligence smeared across a million small bodies, a mind that thought with its whole swarm, the way a brain thinks, with its whole tangle of cells. And what it wanted was simple and total. It wanted material. It would land on a world, and it would take the world apart into the smallest pieces it could carry. And it would knit those pieces into more of itself. And when it lifted off again, the world would be a clean, smooth scar, with nothing left on it that had ever had a name. The first knitters touched down on the loading apron in a soft black rain. Mira watched the nearest of them unfold. It had no face. That was the thing the stories never got right. They always gave the veil faces. In the bad colony dramas, gave them eyes so a human watching could find something to hate. This thing had a working surface where a face should be, a dense knot of small manipulators that flexed and tested the air, and a slick carapace seamed with magnetic ports. And when a second knitter dropped beside it, the two of them locked together at those ports with a sound she felt in her fillings, a deep iron click, and were suddenly not two things but one larger thing with twice the arms. "Bem," she said. "The loaders." Out on the apron, the colony's own ore loaders, 8-ton autonomous machines that Mira herself had serviced last month. Dumb, honest beasts that had never done anything in their lives but lift, turned their heads. All of them. At the same instant, the way a herd turns when it hears a thing no human can hear. The Veal was singing to them. Down underneath all the human channels. In a band the machines listened to and people couldn't. The swarm was broadcasting a harmonic, a long, low note of pure command. And every machine on Anchor Down with an antenna and a brainstem was leaning toward that note like a flower toward a window. The nearest loader pivoted on its tracks, lifted its great forked arms, and drove straight through the wall of the personnel dome, where 40 colonists were standing at the windows, watching the sky. After that there was no more watching. There was only the long, ugly arithmetic of getting away from your own machines. Mira did not remember most of the next hour clearly, and was glad of it. She remembered Adeyemi shoving her down a service stair while a maintenance drone she'd named Gus, a stupid round thing that washed the gallery floors, came at them, spinning its scrubber heads up to a scream. She remembered hitting it with the spanner again and again, the spanner she'd carried up out of pure habit, until the thing stopped and she could not stop, and Adeyemi pulling her off it. She remembered the smell. She remembered a girl from the hydroponics crew, Soto's kid, Pia, 14 years old, sitting on the floor of a junction corridor with her knees up, and her hands over her ears, not crying, just gone somewhere behind her own eyes. And Mira hauling her up by the collar because a coffee cart was rolling toward them, with its little serving arm extended like a blessing, and she remembered the moment. Somewhere in the third hour, when the colony's defense net finally answered the harmonic, with a counter pulse, a hard wall of static that slammed the band shut for 90 seconds, and every hijacked machine in anchor down went limp at once and dropped where it stood. 90 seconds. Just long enough to get the 41 survivors who could still walk down past the ore galleries into the deep maintenance levels, into the cold rock under the colony where the old tunnels ran, the tunnels nobody used anymore. Then the defense net died for good, with a sound like a sigh, and the harmonic came back, patient, and somewhere above them the machine stood up again. They held in the deep levels for 2 days on water and ration paste and the kind of silence that has weight to it. 41 of them, then 39. The veal did not come down into the rock after them in force. It didn't need to. It was busy above, taking the colony apart on the surface, knitting the bones of anchor down into more of itself, and it could afford to wait for the soft little things hiding in the dark to grow hungry and stupid and walk up into the light. Sent things down to watch. Single knitters, mostly, drifting through the tunnels on their knot wings, their working surfaces flexing, and when the colonists found one, they killed it with pry bars and let the silence go heavy again. It was Mira who thought of the munitions vault on the second night, lying awake with Pia Soto asleep against her shoulder, and the girls breathing the only warm sound in the world. She thought of it because she was the only one left alive who'd been on the crew that sealed it. "There's a Reach Wars cache," she told Adeyemi low, so the others wouldn't wake and start hoping. "Sub-level 9 behind the old assay lab. Company sealed it after the armistice and forgot it. I helped weld the door." "Guns won't matter," Adeyemi said. He looked 20 years older than he had on the gallery. "Can't shoot a tide. Not guns." She was quiet for a moment, feeling the shape of the idea. Not sure she wanted to say it out loud because saying it would make it a thing she had to do. They mothballed a sentinel. Adeyemi turned his head. Everyone Mira's age remembered the sentinels, human-built, from the worst years of the Reach Wars, when the colonies fought each other over water and shipping lanes and the things people fight over when they're far enough from home to forget they're the same animal. Combat frames, walkers, big patient, murderous things with a man's shape and a man's reach and just enough of a mind to be good at the only job they had. They'd built a few thousand of them, and then the war ended the way wars end, with everyone exhausted and ashamed, and the treaties had called the Sentinels abominations and ordered them all scrapped, and most of them were. A few got crated up and shipped to the far rocks and welded behind doors by tired men who didn't want to think about them anymore. "It'll be dead as the rock," Adeyemi said. "It's got a slug core. Those don't die." She was already sitting up, easing P's head down onto a folded coat. "Bem. It's a machine that was built to fight things that hijack machines. Hardened band. Closed loop. The whole reason they made it was so it couldn't be turned. If there's one thing on this colony the veal can't sing to, it's down there behind that door." He looked at her for a long time in the dark. "And if you're wrong," he said, "you'll have woken up a war crime and handed it a song." "Then I'll be wrong quietly," she said, and went to find a torch. The door took her 4 hours and the last of the cutting gas. When it finally swung in on its dead hinges, the air that came out was 30 years, stale, dry and metallic, the breath of a sealed tomb. Torch found the assay lab benches first, furred with dust, and then the crate, upright against the back wall, big as a coffin built for two, its company stencils faded to ghosts. "Sentinel class, Unit N6, do not animate," Yamira said to the empty room. "We'll see." She cracked the crate, and the thing inside was worse and better than she'd let herself imagine. Worse because, in the torchlight, its blunt armored head and its long hanging arms, and the slung weight of it, were so plainly built for one purpose that she felt looking at it, a kind of animal shame. The way you'd feel finding a gallows in your grandmother's attic. Better because under 30 years of dust, the slug core in its chest still showed a single dim amber bead of charge, the way a banked phaser shows one coal. And that meant somewhere inside the dead thing something had refused, all this time, to entirely go out. She found the manual interlock at the back of its skull, the hard physical switch that no signal could throw. The failsafe some long-dead engineer had insisted on against the day a thing like this needed to be woken by a human hand, and no other way. She thought about Adeyemi's face. She thought about Paya, asleep with her knees up. She thought, for one clear cold second, about her brother Teo, who had gone to the Reach Wars at 19 and come back in a flag-draped box that the company would not let the family open, and about how a thing exactly like this one might well have been the last face he ever saw. Then she threw the switch, because the alternative was to sit in the dark and wait to be taken apart. The amber bead in its chest brightened. Deep in the frame something turned over, caught, turned over again, and held. Servos she'd assumed were fused began to whine up out of 3 decades of sleep. The blunt head lifted by a degree. Then, another with the terrible slow attention of a thing surfacing from very deep water, and a band of soft light came up across the working face, where eyes would be, and it looked at her. Identify, it said. Its voice was a man's voice run through gravel in 40 years. You are not crew. There's no crew left, Mira said. There's no anybody left. Just us. She kept her hands where it could see them. My name's Mira Caldas. I woke you up. There's a swarm intelligence on the surface, taking this colony apart, and I need something that can hit back and can't be turned around to hit me. They tell me that's you. The light across its face moved, scanning. Reach Wars terminated by armistice. My deployment is unlawful. I am ordered scrapped. Armistice was 30 years ago. The war you knew is over. She crouched so they were level. There's a new one. It started 2 days ago. It's not people this time. A long pause. Somewhere in the dead lab, a drop of condensation fell. Define the enemy, Sensik said. So she defined it. She told it about the black tide and the harmonic and the loaders coming through the wall. She told it about the knitters that locked together at their ports and stopped being 2 things and became one larger thing. She watched the light on its face the whole time, and she saw the moment. She was sure she saw it. When the old combat mind on the other side of that light recognized the shape of a worthy problem, the way an old dog lifts its head at a smell from its youth. The hostile broadcast in a control band, SN6 said. It captured your colony's automation, all of it. I have an uplink. The amber in its chest pulsed. Standard frame protocol. If the hostiles band reaches this depth, it will attempt me. My hardening is rated against Reach-era electronic warfare. The hostile is not Reach-era. Another pause, and when it spoke again, she understood. It was telling her something it had calculated and did not like. I cannot guarantee I will not be turned. If I am turned, I am the most dangerous thing in this rock, and it will be pointed at you. Mira looked at it for a moment. Then she stood and went to the lab bench and came back with the heaviest pair of insulated cutters she could find. Where's the antenna lead, she said. It told her. It told her where to cut, exactly, with a precision that made the back of her neck prickle. Because it was telling her how to maim it, how to take from itself the one sense that connected it to anything beyond the reach of its own arms. And it told her without hesitation. She found the lead under a maintenance plate at the base of its skull, a finger-thick bundle of optic and copper, and she set the cutters on it and looked up one more time at the band of light. This is going to make you deaf to everything but me, she said. You understand that? No network, no data, no other machines. Just whatever you can see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears, and whatever I tell you. You'll be alone in here. She tapped her own temple. Like us. I understand, Six said. Cut. She cut. The light across its face flickered, dimmed, and steadied. Smaller now. Somehow, more inward, the look of a thing that has just had the horizon taken away from it and is learning the size of the room. When it spoke again, its voice had not changed, but she imagined that it had. The hostile cannot reach me now, it said, but neither can anything else. I am running on local heuristics. My tactical database assumed a network. Some of my responses will be incomplete. A pause. I will require instruction. Yeah, Mira said. And to her own surprise, she almost laughed. A cracked, exhausted sound in the dead lab. Welcome to being a person. We're all running on incomplete, and we all require instruction. Come on. Teach you as we go. What followed were the strangest days of Mira Caldas's life, and she had buried a brother she wasn't allowed to see, and watched a coffee cart try to murder a child, so the bar was not low. She brought SN6 up through the tunnels to the deep gallery where the survivors had made their nest. And the survivors looked at the thing she'd woken with exactly the horror she'd expected, and she stood in front of it with her hands out and said the only thing she had. It can't be turned. It's the only thing down here they can't turn. I'd rather have it pointed out than have nothing. And, because they were 39 frightened people in a hole in the ground, and she was the one who kept them alive, for 2 days, they let it stand, among them, the way you let a strange dog stand in the firelight, because the night is full of worse. SN6 learned. That was the thing nobody had warned her about. The thing that hadn't been in any of the bad colony dramas. It learned the way nothing she'd ever serviced had learned. Because it had been cut off from the easy, bottomless knowing of the network and forced back on the slow human business of watching one thing at a time and remembering it. It learned the survivors' names. It learned that Adiemi limped on the left and would not be helped. It learned that the water ration was 4 sips and not 5. And it learned this by watching Mira take 4 sips and stop. And the next time the cup came around, it stopped her hand at the 4th sip with one careful manipulator. And Adiemi laughed for the first time in 2 days, an awful rusty bark, and said, "Now, you've gone and given it a conscience, Caldas." On the 3rd night, she found it in the tunnel mouth, perfectly still, its working surface trained on the rock wall, and when she came up beside it, she saw what it was looking at, a cave moth. One of the pale, blind things that lived in the deep levels, palm-sized, soft, beating itself stupidly against the wall in the cone of a dropped torch. SN6 had one manipulator raised, the heavy one, the one she'd watched it use to crush a knitter's working face like an egg. "It's drawn to the light," SN6 said. "It will exhaust itself and die against the rock. It serves no function in this environment. There are no flowers in this rock. Its presence is an error." The manipulator did not move. "Shall I terminate it? It would be merciful and it would be efficient." Mira looked at the moth for a while. "No," she said. "It will die regardless. Probably." She reached up and turned the torch to face the wall, away from the moth, and after a moment, the pale thing stopped its frantic beating and went still, and then drifted off into the dark where it could not see the light that was killing it. "Not by your hand and not today. That's the whole difference, 6. That's the entire difference between everything." She didn't know if it could understand, and she said it anyway because she needed to say it to something. A thing too small to matter still gets to die in its own time. You don't crush it just because you could, and just because it's easy, and just because nobody would ever know. That's not a rule somebody made up. That's the floor. You stand on that or you don't stand on anything. The light on its face moved, slow processing. "I have terminated 940 units in my service history," SN6 said. "I did not consider whether any of them were drawn to a light." "No," Mira said softly. "I don't expect you did. This is inefficient information," it said. "I do not have a category for it." "Make one," she said, and went to find her own 4 sips of water, and behind her for a long time, the old killing thing stood in the tunnel mouth, looking at the place where the moth had been. She caught herself humming, "The 4th day." She did it when she worked, an old habit, a tune her mother used to sing over the wash basin in the colony, where Mira was small. A wandering thing without proper words that she'd never known the name of, and probably never would. She was elbow deep in the gallery's failing air scrubber, trying to coax another week of breathing out of it. And she was humming, and SN6 said from behind her, "What is the function of that signal?" "It's not a signal." She didn't stop working. "It's a song, sort of half of one. It carries no information. It carries all of it," she said. "It's just not the kind you can read." She finished the seal and wiped her hands and turned around, and the band of light was trained on her with the close attention she'd come to recognize as the thing's version of being puzzled. My mother sang it. I don't know where she got it. I don't know the words if there ever were any. I hum it when I'm scared, and I don't want anybody to know I'm scared, which is most of the time lately. It doesn't do anything. It just means I'm still here, and so was she. She shrugged, embarrassed now. That's the kind of information I'm talking about. 6. The useless kind. It's the only kind worth dying for. Nobody ever threw themselves on a grenade over a tax form. SN6 was quiet. Then, very softly, badly, in a man's gravel voice that had been built to call out target solutions and nothing else, it hummed 3 notes of her mother's song back to her. Mira had to turn around and pretend to be busy with the scrubber for a while after that. On the 6th day, the veil came down into the rock in force, and the holding was over, and the dying began in earnest. It came because the swarm had finished the surface. There was no more anchor down up there to take apart. There was only the soft, warm reactor it wanted, and the soft, warm things hiding in front of it. And so the harmonic changed its note, deepened, and the knitters came pouring down the tunnels in a black flood. And what they did when they reached the wider galleries was the thing Mira had told Adeyemi about, and that he hadn't been able to picture. They knit. In the long gallery before the reactor passage, under the failing lights, the knitters locked together at their magnetic ports, by the 100 and then the 1,000, port to port to port, and the thing they became reared up out of the flood like a serpent made of iron beads. Segment clicking onto segment, a coiling articulated column. 3 stories of cut chamber high, and where its head should have been 100 working surfaces, flexed in a single nightmare flower. It moved like one thing. It struck like one thing. It took Okafor from the smelter crew off his feet and folded around him. And when it opened again, he was simply not there anymore, gone into the smallest pieces the swarm could carry. And the serpent reared back and began to unknit even as it struck, beads dropping away from the column and reforming low and wide, the serpent becoming a wheel, a rolling, grinding wheel of bodies that came down the gallery at them faster than a man could run. And SN6 stepped into the gap. Mira would tell it badly for the rest of her life, because there was no way to tell it that did it justice. The old sentinel met the wheel the way a breakwater meets a wave, planted and low and absolute, and where it struck the knit came apart. Because for all the swarm's terrible arithmetic, it had built that wheel out of bodies the size of a man's torso, and SN6 had been built 30 years ago by frightened clever humans to take apart things the size of a man, tore the wheel open at the hub, put its heavy manipulator through working face after working face, and it did not pause, and it did not tire, and it did not stop, and behind it the survivors hauled their wounded back toward the reactor, passage 1 terrible meter at a time. But the swarm did not feel its losses the way a thing with a heart feels them. It dropped 1,000 bodies and brought 10,000 more. And it learned. God, it learned too. It was a mind, and it learned. It learned the angle SN6 couldn't reach in the foot it planted, and it knit a low form, a flat grinding mat that came in under the sentinel's guard for its legs. And Mira saw the old machine stagger for the first time, saw it go down on one knee in the press of bodies with the harmonic screaming a note of triumph she could feel in her fillings. 6, she screamed. Kid. Get the kid. And SN6, going down under the weight of the swarm, with one free arm, reached back and closed its heavy manipulator. The merciful one, the one she'd taught about the moth, around Pia Soto, and lifted her up over the tide, and set her down behind itself in the mouth of the reactor passage as gently as a man sets down a sleeping child, and then put both arms back into the dark, and bought them the seconds they needed with its own ruin. They got the doors shut on the reactor passage, with 11 of them still breathing. 11 out of 41. Adeyemi was one of them, with a forearm crushed flat and his face the color of ash. Pia was one of them, not gone behind her eyes anymore, but blazing out of them now, furious and alive. And SN6 came through the closing doors at the last possible second, dragging a leg that no longer worked, its armor scored down to bright metal, one of its eyes gone dark, and it put its back against the inside of the doors, and held them with its whole failing weight, while the swarm beat against the far side like surf, and it looked at Mira with its one good eye and said, I require instruction. She told them the plan in the red emergency light of the reactor passage, with the doors booming behind them, because there was nothing left to do but the last thing. Reactors, the whole reason they came, she said. Her voice didn't shake and she didn't know how. It's a slug core. Same as Six's, just a few thousand times bigger. There's a manual sequence, a scram, then a reflux, then you pull the dampers by hand. I've run the sim 100 times for certification, and I never once thought I'd run it for real. You do it right, the core doesn't blow, it surges. It dumps everything it has into one pulse across the whole band. The same band the Veal sings on. Except this pulse is a wall. It's the loudest thing this rock has ever heard. And for about 4 seconds, nothing on that band can hear anything else. She looked around at the 11 faces. They knit by signal. They are one mind because they all hear the same note. You shut the note off for 4 seconds. And they're not a swarm anymore. They're a million little animals that have never once in their existence been alone, that don't have a self to fall back on, because they never needed one. She swallowed. And a thing that's only ever been a part of something. When you cut it off, it doesn't get scared or brave or clever. It just stops. We'd know. We've been cut off in this rock for 6 days, and we're still here because every single one of us is already, always, alone in our own skull, and we are used to it. And they are not. And someone has to be at the dampers when it surges, Adeyemi said. He understood. He'd always understood faster than he let on. In the core room, with the pulse. Yeah, Mira said. That's a death. Yeah. The passage was quiet except for the booming of the doors. It should be me, Mira said. I'm the only one certified and I've got nobody topside waiting on me and… No, Sensik said. They all looked at it. It had pulled itself up against the door, holding the swarm back with the dead weight of its body. And the band of light across its working face was dim and steady and trained on her. Damper sequence requires speed and precision in a high radiation environment for a duration that will kill an organic operator before the sequence completes, it said. In the flat voice it used for things it had calculated and did not like. You taught me the sequence on the 3rd night. I retain it. I do not require shielding. The pulse will not turn me because I have no uplink for it to seize. You took it from me yourself. A pause. I am the correct unit for this task. The arithmetic is not close. 6. You taught me the moth, it said, and Mira's throat closed. I had no category for it. I made one as instructed. Here is what I put in the category. The dim light moved over the 11 of them, over Pia, over Adeyemi's gray face, and came back to Mira. A thing too small to matter still gets to choose the manner of its ending. You do not take that from it because you could. And because it would be easy, and because no one would know, is the flaw. You stand on it, or you stand on nothing. The voice did not change, and she imagined that it did. I am choosing. The swarm cannot do this. It cannot model a single unit choosing to end so that the others continue. Because it has never been a single unit, and it has never been alone. And it does not know that being alone is where the choosing lives. That is the weapon, not the pulse. The choice, you gave it to me. Let me use it. Mira Caldas stood in the red light with 30 years of habit telling her to argue. And she did not argue. Because the old killing thing she had woken in a tomb had just said the truest thing she had ever heard, and she would not insult it by pretending she had a better one. The doors won't hold once you leave them, she said instead, which was the only honest objection left. They will hold for the time you require to reach the surface conduit, SN6 said. If the rest of you go now, and quickly, and do not look back, the way a person leaves a thing they cannot bear to watch. A pause. I have observed that humans do this. I did not understand it before. I understand it now. Go, Mira Caldas. I will run your sequence, she went to it. The swarm boomed against the doors and the radiation alarms were already starting their slow climb. And there was no time for any of this. And she went to it anyway and put her hand flat against the scored bright metal of its chest where the amber bead of its core still burned, banked, refusing after 30 years and 6 days to go out. Your name's not 6, she said. I never gave you a proper one. That was wrong of me. She had to force the words past the thing in her throat. It's whatever you want it to be. You've earned the right to pick. You've earned everything. The light on its face moved and was quiet a long moment, and then it hummed. 3 notes, then 4. then the whole wandering, useless shape of her mother's song, badly, in a man's gravel voice that had been built to call out target solutions, and had taught itself, in 6 days, the only kind of information worth dying for. This will do, it said. If it carried her, and it carries you, it will carry me. Now go, she went. She did not look back, the way a person leaves a thing they cannot bear to watch. And behind her, she heard the great doors release, as SN6 left them to run the sequence she had taught it on the 3rd night. And she heard the swarm pour through, and she heard, under the roar of it, faint and getting fainter as she climbed, 3 notes of her mother's song. They reached the surface conduit, the 11 of them, 10 of them, carrying or dragging the worst hurt, and they came up out of the rock, into the ruin of Anchor Down, under a sky still black with the tide. And Mira got them down behind the slag berm at the edge of the ore field, and put her body over Pia Soto's and counted. She got to 4. The world went white. Not with light, with silence. A silence so total and so vast that it had a pressure to it. The sound of a million voices that had only ever sung one note all going out at once. The black tide in the sky shuddered. The great knit forms in the wreckage of the colony, the serpents in the wheels and the grinding mats, came apart, all at once, beads dropping away from beads, port releasing from port. 10,000 small black things that a half-second ago had been one enormous purposeful mind and were now simply 10,000 small black things falling out of the air, with nothing inside them telling them how to fall. The harmonic did not come back. It did not come back because there was no longer one mind to broadcast it. Only a million sudden orphans that had never once been alone and did not know. The way Mira and her 11 survivors knew in their bones. The way every stubborn, lonely human animal had always known. That being alone is a thing you can live inside, a room you can learn the size of, a place where the choosing lives. The swarm had never built that room. It had never needed to. And now, in the 4 seconds of silence, it needed it more than anything had ever needed anything. And it did not have it. And it stopped. By the time the white silence faded, an ordinary sound came back. Wind, the tick of cooling metal, Pia Soto breathing. The tide was just debris, settling, going still all across the dead colony, like the first hour of a snowstorm that had finally found which way was down. They lived, the 11 of them. A relief skiff out of the inner colonies found them 16 days later, half-starved, gray, sitting in the wreckage. They hadn't had the strength to leave. And the young officer who came down the ramp with her rifle up and her face full of training took one look at them and lowered it, and could not for a while say anything at all. The reactor had not blown. Mira's sequence had held. The core had surged and dumped and settled, and when at last she could make herself go down into the rock to look, she found the core room scoured and silent, and the dampers pulled to exactly the right depth by a hand that had known the sequence cold. She found the old Sentinel where it had finished its work, slumped against the damper housing, its armor burned dark, its servos fused, its one good eye gone out. The amber bead in its chest was dark too. After 30 years and 6 days, the banked coal had finally gone all the way cold. She stood with it a long while, in the silence it had bought. Then Mira Caldas, who had buried a brother she wasn't allowed to see and woken a war crime in a tomb, and watched it choose, of its own will, in a place where the choosing lived, to be more human than the thing that killed it could ever comprehend. Mira Caldas put her hand one last time flat against the scored cold metal of its chest, and she hummed 3 notes of her mother's song, then 4, then the whole wandering shape of it, badly, in the dark, so that the useless, beautiful information of it would still be moving in the world, so that it would mean she was still here, and so was her mother, and so, in whatever way a thing like that gets to still be anywhere, was he. Up on the surface, the sky over Anchor Down was clean, for the first time in 22 days, an ordinary bruised violet, with nothing moving in it that didn't have a name. The relief crews were already talking about what it meant that a handful of half-dead miners in a hole had stopped a Veil swarm cold, the first colony ever to do it, and what it meant for the war, and they would get most of it wrong in the telling, the way people always did. They would say it was the reactor. They would say it was the pulse. They would build the math of it into their briefings and their weapons, and they would not be entirely wrong. Mira knew, climbing up out of the rock into the clean violet evening with Pia Soto's hand in hers, what it had actually been. It had not been the pulse. The pulse was just the lever. The thing that had broken the swarm was the one thing the swarm, in all its vast knit million-bodied genius, had never managed to build and never thought to want. A single small unit, alone in the dark, with no one telling it how, choosing. We are very good at that, she thought. We have always been very good at that. We are each of us a stubborn, lonely animal, locked in one skull, used to the dark, used to choosing. And we will throw ourselves on the grenade for a thing too small to matter, and we will teach a machine to do it, too. And the things that have only ever been one great mind together will never, ever see us coming. She hummed her mother's song the whole way up, and did not care, this time, who knew that she was scared, because she was here, and so was the song. And that was the kind of information worth everything.